So I want to go back to Interpol. You mentioned that they had talked to you about, I'm going to call it the world's longest pirate hunt. I have a show note in front of me that at one point you received footage from Interpol that showed the murder of four men somewhere in the Indian Ocean. Is this the same instance, or is this a different tip from Interpol?
Separate incident. So yeah, different source at Interpol, early stages. Guy I've known a long time, ex-military, ex-law enforcement. Now was then at Interpol. I told him I was on the market for interesting stuff. He trusts me, so he'll hook me up with good stuff. And he's like, I was actually in Thailand reporting on the sea slavery thing, and I got this email from him. He's a real understated kind of guy, and the email said, "Brace yourself." And I was like, that's unusual. Like nothing spooks this guy. And so it was a video, it was 11-minute video of a slow motion slaughter, anywhere from 9 to 15, depending on your tally, guys that are shot. They're in the water. The guys firing are on one, maybe two automatic weapons. Turned out after the investigation that these are private maritime security guys working on behalf of. But the footage is chilling, not just because you see these guys that are kind of trying to get away and they're clinging to what looks like wreckage. It was a D-Howe that had been rammed. But also because at the end of the video, whoever is filming turns the camera on his buddies and they all sort of rejoice in selfies. They kind of like, this kind of carnal rage over the shooting spree they just had, which is just a new depth of darkness. So I got the video and thought, whoa, this is a great tip, because you've got the culprits or witnesses, you've got footage, you've got clear murder. Those guys are not a threat anymore. They're guys in the water on the these are huge ships. Even if they were pirates, which was the initial BS line I got from law enforcement, they were not a threat at that point. They were just, dudes in the water. So this was like a no-brainer murder of multiple guys on footage, and we got faces of folks who were on scene. And if I dig at this, which we did for multiple years, I bet you we could figure out what the ships were, because there are ships in the background, and we could zoom in, we could get their IMO numbers. So we did that. So I started an investigation on that one in the New York Times, put that on the front page, and then stuck with the investigations. And 7 years later, they caught. We stayed involved with law enforcement, et cetera, and ultimately wrote a story after I left the Times for the Washington Post, where the captain had been caught, prosecuted, and sent away for 20 years. And that was sort of the arc of that whole investigation. It took a long time, but a different tip.
What do you think would have happened had media not gotten involved in that and told that story? Do you think it would have just gone unreported?
No, I mean, this is a lob for an alley-oop, sure, I think that journalists matter and we have a good role to play often. In this case, for sure, like that story would not have, it was on the dark web. Some people in the space knew of its existence, but there's no way the Taiwanese prosecutors would have ever taken the case, arrested the guy. I mean, when I was even just, had we only put it on the front page of the New York Times and walked away, it wouldn't have resulted in a prosecution. It's only because we spent the next 4 years banging them the drum and coming back to them and putting stuff out and saying, hey, so you still haven't called the guy in? You know the name of the captain. You haven't questioned him? How is that possible? Well, he's at sea and it's difficult, and he was in international waters, so we don't know if we have jurisdiction. These sorts of roundabout questions. But because we stuck with it for multiple years, that ended up in a prosecution.
Wow. So in the course of 4 years, I mean, unpack for me what you found. I can only fathom. And when you said they've been out there for a year and a half, I mean, obviously I'm assuming they're going back to port to offload, but that's a long stretch of time out on the high ocean.
Yeah, so your assumption is logical but wrong. So when near shore stocks collapse, something emerged called at-sea transshipment. And so like the distant water fishing fleet, those guys that target foreign waters or high seas, mostly engage in transshipment at sea. So the fishing vessel, and that's an economic choice. You send out a fishing vessel, the costliest thing, the thing that will make you in the red, not the black, is fuel and labor. And fuel is your biggie. So if you don't have to come back to shore and you can stay in the fishing grounds for a year straight and have a mothership come out, she brings ice, parts, men,
Yep.
food, whatever, and she takes the stuff back. And then you're just going the whole time. And those are the most brutal ships, transshipment at sea, distant water, transshipment vessels, especially if you got a ship that's using foreign crew. So it's going to be Taiwanese, Korean, Chinese, New Zealand, whatever. And if the crew are foreign, then you got a real risk indicator. And if it's transshipment and if it's staying out longer than 2 years, there's a really good chance of bad stuff's happening there. Anyway, but to your question, I forgot your core question.
The core question is, in 4 years and actually getting this level of access in different areas around the globe. I mean, I get, obviously it's a huge and broad question, but can you just unpack some of the things that you must have seen?
Yeah, I mean, so getting on the vessels was an eye opener. I've been on a lot before that, but these are squid vessels. So we focused on the squid fleet because they're the most ships and they're the most notorious. They stay out at sea a long time. They travel the most. So we're like, okay, if we want to find the really dark stuff, let's aim at the Chinese squid fleet, not the tuna ones, because there's bigger money in that. And anyway, so we focused on the squid fleet. Squid ships are unusually gross because squid spray ink whenever they're panicking, and you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of tons of squid coming on board. So the entire ship is just layered in, oozy mucus, walls, floor, accumulated over years. So, and then they work at night, primarily with these massive bowling ball size bulbs, hundreds of them. So you can see a squid jigger 80 miles away with plain sight. They're so bright. And they mostly use foreign crew, Indonesian. Before COVID, it was mostly Indonesian. So we thought this is a good target ship to see what's going on human rights, labor-wise. The living conditions, the food, the long hours, the captivity, not being able to go back to home, were really, really striking. A lot of malnutrition, a lot of beriberi, this disease. It's like scurvy, but scurvy's depletion of vitamin C. Beriberi is not enough vitamin B1, but it means your body starts bloating and retaining water, and it can be fatal, and it's painful, and it's slow motion. Shouldn't be killing anyone. So we're seeing a lot of beriberi. We're seeing a lot of guys that are captive. So yeah, I mean, what we saw in terms of dramatic snapshots was that, and a couple of really intense interactions. We also saw things that are dramatic but statistical, right? So like one dead body every month and a half for the last 8 years flat in one port alone is being offloaded by these vessels in Montevideo. That's one port and one inroad, and that's a death rate that's pretty striking. And a lot of those guys are, never being autopsied or whatever. It's just like, hey, this guy had asthma and he died, or this guy, but he's got crush marks. So a lot of mysterious deaths coming off of those vessels. So yeah, those were the most striking things. And then we looked at not just the at-sea portion, but forced labor on land. So Uyghur, Xinjiang labor in China in seafood, and then North Korean labor in this other spot in China, and broke the story out. Like seafood's coming off of ships that are using captive labor, going into processing plants that are using captive labor, and then being shipped to us in the US and Europe. And so that was the big reveal.
How does that forced labor cycle end for the people that are trapped in it, whether on a vessel or on shore? Is it a certain amount of time and then they're passed along when they're no longer useful? I mean, is there even a light at the end of the tunnel for them?
Yeah, I mean, so think of like the captive labor problem as a global problem. So if you're on the South China Sea and you're dealing with the Thai fleet, you're looking at Cambodians, Rohingya, Myanmar, Burma, Laos, and the model is a certain thing. It's a guy you meet in Cambodia, you're from some poor village. He says, you want a good job in middle class Thailand. I don't have any money. Sure, don't worry about it. Meet me here on Saturday, get in the back of the truck. I'll drive you across. You accrue a debt. He sneaks you into the country. You think you're going to a construction job. You end up at the ports. Off you go on the ship. And the captain pays the trafficker the debt that it costs coming in. and now the captain owns you. Okay, so that's one model, and that's a huge model. There's a lot of guys, boys coming that way. Those guys escape usually by their captain, uses them and then sick of them, and he says, "Okay, fine, you can leave," or they jump ship. And there's a good movie called Ghost Fleet about some islands in Indonesia where lots of these guys have jumped ship, swam to shore. They don't know where they are. They set up a new life and they stay there. And they all have the same tale where they just ended up there and didn't know how to get home. So that's one model. Different model is a more incorporated model. That's like you're in the Philippines, similar guy. You're a villager. You're not super savvy. You don't know what are the warning signs. A guy says, there's no work here, but I could get you on a Taiwanese tuna longliner doing fun things and making some real money. Cool. Yeah. Let me give it a go. I've heard some stories. That guy got a new moped, and that guy got a new roof on his mom's house. They both did some distant water fishing. So let me give it a go. You've got a company that's usually overseeing that. It's a manning agency. And these are like incorporated businesses. They're usually in another place like Singapore or Taiwan or wherever.